What is truth? Does it exist? And if so, how can we tell the difference between what is true and what is false? This is one of the most difficult and complex questions mankind has ever wrestled with. Whole branches of philosophy have been devoted to solving this riddle. The field of epistemology deals with how we acquire knowledge, and a number of major philosophers have disputed that there is even such a thing as truth, or that it can be known. Does reality exist, or are we living in a simulation? Are experiences real, or purely subjective creations of our brains? The good news is that soon we won't have to worry about these thorny problems anymore. The Biden administration is coming to the rescue with the creation of a new agency within the Department of Homeland Security, the Disinformation Governance Board. Inspired by the concerns over the proliferation of false information through social media, the Disinformation Governance Board aims to crack down on irresponsible mistruths that could place themselves or even our democracy in danger. Of course, by mistruths, they mean things that current people in power decide are untrue, with these decisions inevitably reflecting their own worldviews and personal biases. This should ring alarm bells for anyone concerned about freedom of expression or the abuse of government power. After all, free speech and free press are the cornerstones of the American democracy. The claim that the only way to protect democracy is to prohibit people from saying certain things has it exactly backwards. The open exchange of ideas is crucial in holding politicians accountable, making social progress, and making educated decisions about the direction we want our country to go in the future. After all, it is only by challenging the status quo that progress is possible, and so we should welcome new and controversial ideas rather than fear them. You might ask, what's so wrong with suppressing ideas that are obviously and objectively untrue, especially those that have the potential to cause harm if believed? The answer is that it's not so easy to determine what the truth really is at any given moment, and that these determinations will never be free of bias or political motives. Think about your own beliefs, or those of the people that you know. Maybe you're a religious person. Do you think it's a good idea for a government bureaucrat to decide which religions are true and which are false? Maybe you're a believer in natural medicine. Do you want the Disinformation Board to suppress speech about homeopathy, acupuncture, or chiropractor in favor of Western medicine? What about Americans' poor understanding of current events, fed by a cable news fear-mongering? A Gallup survey found that a majority of people overestimate the likelihood of being hospitalized with COVID by an order of magnitude or more. It seems unlikely that this is the kind of falsehood that would be targeted by the Disinformation Board, but it's not hard to see how crackdown on misinformation could end up censoring a huge range of topics that deserve vigorous discussion and debate. Defenders of the need to police speech like to coat their actions with a veneer of scientific objectivity, but science is simply a means of searching for the truth, and it is only as good as the people practicing it. The scientific method doesn't automatically produce gospel. It must be continuously challenged, refined, replicated, and adjusted before it can be trusted to get anywhere near the truth. Any good scientist will admit that more debate, not less, is what makes science work. We know this because science gets things wrong all the time. The astronomer Galileo was persecuted for advancing his factually correct but controversial theory that the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way around. Today we recognize that dogma standing in the way of scientific inquiry was a terrible injustice, and yet we refuse to apply the same logic to our own times. To give a more recent example, much of what was promoted as scientific fact around COVID-19 virus in the first few months of the pandemic turned out to be wrong, while the people questioning those claims, then labeled as conspiracy theorists, turned out to be right. We needed dissent in order to get closer to the truth, a truth that may never have been discovered if a government agency had been policing what people were allowed to say. In another example, Twitter censored the account of the New York Post, a long-standing and reputable newspaper, over a story about Hunter Biden's laptop that later turned out to be true. In this case, the campaign against disinformation resulted in the suppression of true facts in order to protect a presidential candidate's reputation during a campaign. Incidentally, the woman in charge of the new Disinformation Governance Board, Nina Jankowicz, also dismissed the Hunter Biden story as a piece of Donald Trump's campaign propaganda. Why should someone with an already demonstrated inability to parse truth from lie be given the power to make those choices on behalf of everyone else? Of course, all of this is not to say that disinformation doesn't exist, or that it doesn't have the potential to cause harm. Frauds and propagandists have always sought to obscure the truth for their own purposes. But the solution to this is not to prohibit bad actors from speaking, even if it were possible to know for certain that they are. Instead, the best way to combat bad speech is with good speech. Push back against the lies not with bureaucracy, but with the facts, the evidence, and persuasion. There's a reason that no one takes flat earth conspiracy theorists seriously. And it's not because we lock them in jail or ban them from public discourse. It's because anyone could get on a plane and see for themselves that the earth is round. Evidence, not force, is more than enough to keep those crackpot theories from gaining any real power. On the other hand, a coordinated campaign to silence the cranks would only increase their influence. It's not quite clear what actions the Disinformation Governance Board will take to carry out its mission. It's hard to believe that the courts will allow such a blatantly anti-First Amendment agency to stand for very long. Still, it's impossible not to see the board as the realization of the once fictional Ministry of Truth, from George Orwell's 1984. When our elected officials are openly cribbing ideas from totalitarian dystopian novels, it doesn't bode well for the future of our society or for our individual freedoms.